Ukraine strikes Russia's energy vessel. The Arctic sky turns into a sea of fire. September 28, 2025. The icy calm of the Barents Sea shattered in an instant. A 12,000-ton nuclear transport ship, Belogorsk 7, cut through the freezing waters north of Murmansk, carrying what Moscow proudly called the future of strategic warfare. Inside its armored hull were 160 tons of uranium fuel rods, 23 tanks of weapons-grade plutonium, and precision guidance systems for Russia's newest hypersonic missile, the Zircon. To the Kremlin, it was untouchable. To Ukraine, it was unforgivable. From hidden bases in Chernihiv, 75 drones and 3 MiG-29 Ghost Wings roared into the sky. 25 radar jammers, 50 kamikaze drones, and 6 Kh-29L missiles locked onto the vessel's coordinates. Beneath the black clouds of the Arctic night, Kyiv prepared for its boldest operation yet. A strike that would test the limits of courage, precision, and fate itself. Can a small nation truly cripple the nuclear might of a superpower? Or will this act ignite something far greater than war? Let's find out. September 28, 2025, 3:20 a.m., Moscow time. The Barents Sea is calm under a pale moon, icy waves cutting through the northern mist. From a distance, the Russian nuclear cargo ship Belogorsk 7 appears serene, gliding toward the mouth of Kola Bay, the protected artery leading to Severomorsk, home of the Northern Fleet, the centerpiece of Russia's nuclear deterrent. Inside the 12,000-ton ship, 42 crew members are on night duty. Engineers testing cooling valves, technicians monitoring radiation shields, sailors cleaning corridors loaded with heavy machinery. But what they are carrying is far beyond any ordinary cargo. Deep in the steel compartments were nearly 160 tons of uranium fuel rods, 23 containers of weapons-grade plutonium, and precision mechanical parts for the Zircon missile program. A next-generation hypersonic weapon that Russia claims can fly at Mach 9 and penetrate any Western defense system. The estimated value of the shipment exceeds $4.6 billion, but its strategic value is immense. If the material reaches Severomorsk, Russia will be able to mass-produce Zircon missiles capable of hitting targets 1,000 miles away in less than 7 minutes, enough to overwhelm Ukraine's air defenses and spread terror across Europe. Ukrainian intelligence had been tracking the ship for weeks. Satellite signals from the northern coast of Norway confirmed its route. What they discovered shook the command in Kyiv. The Belogorsk 7 would reach Severomorsk within 9 hours, within radar range of Russia's most fortified naval hub. Waiting any longer would mean disaster. At 3:37 a.m., a single order was transmitted throughout Ukraine's Joint Operations Command. Stop at all costs. There would be no diplomacy, no hesitation. A decision had been made. A bold, irreversible, and dangerous one. To stop Zircon before it was born, Ukraine would have to strike at an impossible target, a nuclear-powered energy ship protected by the Northern Fleet itself. And the clock was ticking. 3:45 a.m., secret airbase, Chernihiv region, northern Ukraine. Inside the underground command room, 12 senior officers huddled around a digital map glowing in the dim light. The red marker Belogorsk 7 was moving north at 12 knots, approaching Severomorsk. Every mile it traveled was a countdown to disaster. If the cargo reached its destination, Russia would assemble more than 80 Zircon-M missiles, each capable of carrying a 500-kiloton nuclear warhead, 40 times the power of a Hiroshima bomb. Ukraine's top strategist, General Pavlo Hrytsenko, pointed to the screen. "We strike now, or we will face hypersonic fire." His plan was bold, almost reckless, but mathematically precise. 25 decoy UAVs equipped with radar jammers to blind Russian surveillance systems. 50 kamikaze drones, each carrying 40 pounds of PBX-12 explosives, programmed to simulate a full-sized airborne swarm. 3 MiG-29 Ghost Wing fighters, armed with 6 laser-guided Kh-29L missiles, to deliver the final blow. Every coordinate, altitude, and time frame was calculated down to the second. The plan hinged on a fragile truth. 5 minutes of chaos inside Severomorsk's radar network would decide the fate of the mission. At 4:15 a.m., the crew refueled each MiG-29 with 4,500 liters of jet fuel. Technicians on the ground checked their targeting devices while the pilots, an average age of 29, silently fastened their helmets. No music, no speeches. Just the soft hum of the engines and the understanding that failure meant extinction. At 4:22 a.m., the hangar doors opened. Under the dawn sky, 75 drones shot up like sparks into the darkness. And minutes later, 3 silvery black shapes soared north toward the Arctic. The hunt was on. Would Ukraine's gamble strike the heart of Russia's power? Or would Moscow's defenses turn the sky into a wall of fire? 4:31 a.m., the Arctic sky was dark and silent. Then, in a matter of seconds, the silence was broken. From a position 60 miles south of Kola Bay, a swarm of 75 Ukrainian drones swept in like a steel tide through the low clouds. 25 designed to jam any radar screens, 50 armed with high-explosive warheads, each carrying a payload of more than 40 pounds. Their flight signatures vanished under the electromagnetic storm they created. For a brief moment, the Russian radar stations near Cape Sviatoy Nos lit up in chaos. Dozens of moving points of light appeared. 75 low-flying points of contact spread out over a 40-mile radius. Sirens blared across Severomorsk's early warning network. In the control bunker, commanders shouted orders. The S-350 Vityaz system was activated, 12 launchers rotating into the sky. Nearby, 3 Panzer S-1 batteries were activated, locking onto targets at an altitude of less than 152 meters. At 4:35 a.m., the first missiles roared off the tracks, 28 9M96 interceptors, each traveling at Mach 5.5. One by one, the drones exploded in mid-air, lighting up the sky like a fiery snowfall. In 10 minutes, the airspace became a firestorm. 37 UAVs destroyed, 11 exploded in mid-air, 8 burned up in a chain reaction. The Russians believed they had survived the storm. The officers breathed a sigh of relief, thinking the swarm was over. But what they didn't see was what was lurking above the clouds. 3 MiG-29s hiding at 27,000 feet, waiting for the noise to die down. At 4:40 a.m., the order was given. In perfect formation, the MiG-29s soared through the clouds like eagles hunting for prey. In just a few seconds, their altitude plummeted from 3,600 meters to 1,200 meters, their speed skyrocketing to over Mach 1.2. The commanding pilot, Captain Alexei Horunzhi, had armed himself. 6 Kh-29L laser-guided missiles, each weighing 560 kilograms and capable of penetrating a meter of reinforced steel. 4:41:22 a.m. The first collision. 2 missiles plummeted, glowing white, into the Belogorsk 7's engine compartment. The impact shattered the ship's central engine core, causing a blast wave that shattered windows 4 miles away. 4:41:29 a.m. A second salvo. 2 more Kh-29s pierced the midship deck, where the uranium fuel assemblies were secured. The impact vaporized protective shields, sending superheated debris flying across the ship. 4:41:34 a.m. The final 2 missiles slammed into the forward containment bay, rupturing the plutonium reactor vessels and hydraulic stabilizers used in Sircon's assembly lines. The ensuing explosion was blinding, a 300-foot column of fire, more than 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, 1,100 degrees Celsius, turning the sky a molten orange. In less than 27 seconds, the 42 crew members had no chance of escape. Within 3 minutes, Belogorsk 7 was gone, a mountain of steel swallowed by the Arctic. Its beacon flashed on radar and then vanished. Above the flames, the MiG-29s banked sharply westward, then disappeared into the clouds. The unthinkable had happened. A single coordinated attack, lasting just 8 minutes and 24 seconds, had destroyed a multi-billion-dollar ship and rewritten the balance of power in the north. What happens next will shock even Russia's own commanders. Stay with me, because the real chaos begins after the explosion. And Russia's own commanders, stay with me, because the real chaos begins after the explosion. 05:06 a.m. Barents Sea. The inferno that was the Belogorsk 7 burned like a second dawn over the Arctic. The explosion turned 1.6 million gallons of ship fuel and hundreds of radioactive elements into a boiling cauldron. Fireballs soared 400 feet into the sky, and within minutes, a crimson glow reflected off ice fields stretching more than 20 nautical miles. Shockwaves rippled across the Kola Bay, smashing into Russian patrol boats and shattering windows across the Severomorsk coast. For Moscow, the nightmare was more than just a military one. It was an environmental, economic, and psychological one. Preliminary estimates suggest that more than $4.6 billion in classified nuclear materials and technology were lost. More than 42 crew members were killed instantly, and the ship's wreckage was scattered across a 7-square-mile wreckage, still smoldering and emitting toxic fumes. Russian emergency response units scrambled helicopters and naval rescue ships, but radiation alarms forced them to retreat before they could reach the wreck. By 5:15 a.m., the Northern Fleet headquarters was in full lockdown. Satellite communications with Moscow were flooded with conflicting reports, some claiming a NATO drone strike, others pointing directly at Ukraine. In Kyiv, officials remained silent. A single phrase was shared on encrypted networks: "The target has been neutralized." Across Europe, radiation sensors detected faint anomalies drifting southward on Arctic winds. Norway and Finland raised their defense alert levels, while the European Union convened an emergency meeting before dawn. News outlets reported at 6 a.m. that it was the most dangerous explosion in the Northern Sea since 1986. Inside Russia, chaos spread faster than the flames. State television obscured images of the burning wreck, but video from fishermen leaked within hours. Rough seas, dead birds, a plume of smoke that seemed to reach into the clouds. On social media, Russians began asking the question their government feared most: how could a nation with the world's most powerful navy lose a nuclear warship within sight of its own harbor? As the sun rose, Arctic winds carried both smoke and silence. The Severomorsk naval base, once a symbol of power, was now surrounded by an invisible threat. And as the flames died down, Moscow's worst fears became clear. Its nuclear heart had been struck not by an army, but by a precision, calculation, and boldness it had never expected. By the afternoon of September 28, 2025, the Arctic fires had subsided, but the political storm was just beginning. Moscow confirmed the loss of the Belogorsk 7, calling it an industrial accident, but satellite imagery released by Western intelligence told a different story. A 12,000-ton ship ripped in half, burned to the keel, surrounded by an 11-kilometer-wide contaminated zone. What Ukraine achieved in 8 minutes cost Russia more than $4.6 billion in lost materials, decades of research, and a devastating blow to its nuclear credibility. Analysts compared the attack to a modern-day Tsushima, a humiliation that reshaped naval warfare a century ago. Within hours, the Northern Fleet grounded all nuclear transport ships. Production of Zircon missiles was halted indefinitely. More than 300 engineers were reassigned to investigate the lost prototypes. Even Russia's state energy agency warned that the cleanup could take 10 years and cost an additional $2.2 billion, while radiation readings near Kola Bay spiked 240% above baseline. In Kyiv, officials broke their silence at 7 p.m. local time. The statement was brief but firm: "We acted to prevent a larger catastrophe." Behind closed doors, Western defense officials quietly acknowledged admiration, not for the destruction, but for the precision. No civilian targets were hit. No chain reaction ensued. It was an operation performed under impossible conditions. But the ethical debate has spread beyond the battlefield. Was this a defensive struggle for survival, or a step into a darker age of preemptive warfare? For many, it symbolized the rise of small nations that valued intelligence over intimidation, technology over payload. As the dust settled over the Barents Sea, one truth remained: the war had entered a new chapter, one written not by force but by courage, calculation, and the cold geometry of survival. In the cold stillness of the Barents Sea, only wreckage remained: twisted metal resting beneath layers of blackened ice, a silent grave for 42 sailors and the ambitions of a superpower. The Rostov 93 had vanished, but its shockwaves were only beginning to spread. Across Europe, defense radars stayed on high alert. In Moscow, generals spoke in whispers. And in Kyiv, a quiet sense of grim relief mixed with dread. For every victory in this war carried a shadow. The destruction of the nuclear transport wasn't just another strike. It was a message written in fire. It told the world that the balance of fear had shifted, that a nation once considered outmatched could strike at the heart of a nuclear empire and win. Yet beneath that triumph lay an unspoken question. How far could this war go before no one could turn back? International fallout was immediate. The United Nations called an emergency session, warning of unprecedented escalation. Insurance markets crashed. Shipping routes through the Arctic were suspended. Radiation monitors in Norway, Finland, and northern Russia blinked red for days. Experts estimated cleanup and containment could reach $7 billion over the next decade, with ecological damage stretching across 3,000 square miles of ocean. But while politicians debated, one truth was impossible to ignore. Ukraine's strike had redrawn the map of modern warfare. It wasn't the size of the army that mattered, but the sharpness of intelligence, timing, and resolve. The Rostov 93 would be remembered not only as a tragedy, but as a turning point. The night when a small nation, cornered and desperate, struck the largest shadow on Earth and made it bleed. And as the Arctic wind howled over the empty sea, history took a deep breath, waiting to see who would dare move next. If you believe this story deserves to be told, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below, because somewhere in the silence of that northern sea, history may already be waiting for its next storm.